Hi everyone, I'm Susie and welcome to my channel. In the last video, we downloaded and installed Inkscape and Inkstitch and configured the basic settings. In this video, we are going to get to know the different stitch types, focusing specifically on the fill stitch. As you can see, I already have Inkscape open. The first step when you want to create a design is that the base artwork from which the design will be created must be imported into Inkscape. This can be an image or a vector. Let's import an image now. Just like with our custom thread list, if you missed that, check out the previous video. There are two ways to import an image. We go to File, Import, and then the folder opens there, and we can select the image we need. Or, if your folder is already open, make it smaller. Click on it, and now I'll select the image from here and drag it over there. Now we click OK. I'll put this down, and then you can see here that we are going to turn a nice little apple into an embroidery file today. I'll scale it down. The arrows are what you can use to do this with. This is how you can scale down or scale up the image. If I click on the apple itself one more time though, I can rotate it. Now I'll click back. And if I know the exact measurements I want to set, then the width and the height are up here. I have mine in millimeters, so that's what I'll use. It's important that this padlock is locked, because then it won't let the width move independently from the height. If this is open, then it changes the width and height separately, and then the image will be out of proportion. If I want this to be a 5 cm wide apple now, then since mine is set in millimeters, I need to type 50 for the width. Since the padlock is locked, it scales the height proportionally to the width. So now I have my 5 cm apple. Down here I can zoom in to see it closer. It has been added here on the right side that we have an image. To turn this image into a vector, we need to choose Path, Trace Bitmap up here. Then the apple pops up here. I usually always choose multicolour. Here I don't choose the brightness steps, but the colour option. We know that we have 3 colours, a black, a green, and a red. The program calculates with 8 colours by default, so we don't need to worry about that. We can start reducing this to 3. At 3, it took away the red too, because I didn't calculate in the white background. So actually, I have 4 colours in total. That's why I need to add 1 more colour, and that brings the red back. Here, I can tick the box to remove background. And apply. Since it placed it right on top of our image, you can't see it, but it's still there. These 3 lines here, this is the Layers and Objects tab. And if it's not there for you, don't worry about it, because if you go here to Object, Layer, and Objects, we can end up in the exact same place. So I'll go here. Now my image is here, we can get a folder here too, which has the vector inside. Since we removed the background, we are left with our 3 colours. At this point, I don't delete the image yet, but I can hide it. This is always the first step, importing the file you want to work with. Now, let's try the fill stitch, which is a stitch that fills in your design. So, here is our apple, which has 3 colours. These are all grouped together, so we right click and choose Ungroup. This way my 3 vectors are separate. Here is the stem, here is the leaf, and here is the apple itself. Let's name them so we know which is which. For example, let's give them colours. Let the apple be red. If you double click it, you can rename it. The leaf should be green, and the stem, double click again, is black, but I want it to be brown, so I'll type brown here instead. Since we are already on the stem, which is black now, you can see down here that there is a fill rectangle which is black and a stroke which is unset, so that's not configured. The fill box indicates the colour of the selected element. We can choose any colour from the palette here. This is my thread colour palette, which is Madeira Poly Neon on my system. Let's choose this one. No, that's not good. Let's say this darker brown. There. Now the stem is brown. So here are our three elements. We select the red one, the apple, and we go to Extensions, Inkstitch, Params tab. Here, since it's on an automatic fill, it already shows us exactly what the embroidery is going to look like. What's important here is the spacing between rows line. This 0.25 is the default setting for the density. You can change this to set how dense the embroidery should be. The reason it immediately shows it as a grid-like structure is because underlay is automatically ticked, which is labelled as underpath here, which is also important. For the fill stitch, it is important to have a layer underneath called an underlay, which secures the thread to the stabilizer. Let's go into the Fill Underlay tab, and you can see here as well that it's ticked. We can adjust a few things here. We can set the angle here. Golden rule, the angle of the fill stitch and the underlay should never run in the same direction. If we fill the apple at 0 degrees, meaning horizontally, let's set the underlay angle to, let's say, 90 degrees. This way, the two layers will cross over each other like a mesh. This holds the fabric stable and prevents the embroidery from puckering the material. So I'll say here that this should be 90 degrees. You can also adjust the density here to set how closely the underlay is stitched, but let's not touch those for now. Let's leave them on default. Let's go back to the Fill Stitch tab. We can set the angle here too. It's 0 now, and that's good, because we already configured it in the underlay. As I said earlier, here is the spacing between rows line, which is 0.25 by default. This represents the density. In most cases, the default setting is perfectly fine, so we won't touch it. However, there are some things we do touch. This is the Pull Compensation line. The name is pretty self-explanatory. When you embroider a design and notice that the fabric gathers or wrinkles, this is called puckering. This can be caused by several things, not by changing the tensioner though, but for example, because the Pull Compensation line is not set. As the embroidery machine sews, it will pull the fabric together. This happens when you embroider something round, which looks perfectly round in the software, but when you stitch it out, you can see it become slightly oval. Or if a design element has a border on the finished embroidery and this border is not where it should be, it shifts, and it's not exactly on the edge of the element. This needs to be compensated. People usually set this to 0.1 and 0.4. We widen the shape with this, trying to estimate that however much it pulls, we widen it by that same amount. For me, 0.2 works best, so I set it to 0.2. If the fabric you are embroidering on is thick and stiff, you don't necessarily need this setting, because if it cannot pull the fabric together, there is no deformation. So, we try to correct these shifts digitally with this pull compensation and the underlay angle setting with the mesh for greater stability. A lot of things need to come together for the final embroidery to look beautiful. Stabilizers are also important here. Which one you choose, the needle choice, but digitally, we can help with these settings. So what we've done now is we didn't change the density. We'll see during the stitching how dense it really is, whether it covers the fabric completely, whether we want to cover completely. If we use thinner thread, we might need to make it denser. Here we typed 0.2 for the full compensation. And here for the fill underlay, we entered the angle so that it's 90 degrees different. Besides this, down here, I usually tick the trim after box, meaning to cut the thread at the end. We want for it to show how the embroidery will look this time too. We won't worry about it starting the embroidery from two sides for now. We'll cover that later. But just to see what the fill stitch is and what it looks like, setting these for now is enough. Once that's done, I'll say apply and quit. This brings us back here to the image. It is very important that these settings do not apply to the whole image, but to the selected element. So for every single element, you have to go into params to set the values, so the machine knows what and how you want to embroider. These are what will make up for the final embroidery file, which you will load into your machine in the compatible format. We've done the apple, so let's look at the leaf. Here is the leaf. We need to edit this because you can see that the leaf is wider than it should be. So now that the leaf is selected, we go to Path, Break Apart, and we can immediately see that there are several more small pieces there that we don't need. Let's check. If I hide the first one, I can see that's the leaf, so I don't need the rest. I'll select these by keeping only the first one selected. I hold down Shift and click on the last one, then it selects them all. I'll delete these now, leaving only the leaf itself. Let's make these visible again. Since we modified it, I need to rename it, so here I'll specify green again. The leaf is fine now. Now we do the same as we did with the apple. It is selected, we go to Extensions, Inkstitch, Params tab, where it now shows us how this is going to look. Again, we go to the Fill Underlay tab, then again we set 90 degrees. This is a smaller element, so it shows it closer. The gaps look bigger, but if we come back to fill stitch, we can see here the spacing between rows is the same, 0.25, as before with the apple, so it hasn't changed it. For the pull compensation, we set it to 0.2, just the same. Pay attention here that right under each other, we have pull compensation in millimeters and pull compensation in percentage. We are setting the millimeters. You can see here that the edge of the leaf is not necessarily the best, but this is another change we don't need to worry about now, especially since I'll show you a solution for this later that will cover it up. So once that's done, the 0.25 remains. We've set the pull compensation. We configure trim after again. Again, it shows us how it will look. And let's press apply and quit. Okay, and then we are left with the stem, which we are also going to convert into a fill stitch now. This is the simplest version where everything becomes a fill stitch. We select the stem, again we go to Extensions, Inkstitch, Params. Again, it shows how it will look. So then again, we go to Fill Underlay, and we set to 90 degrees again. We go back to fill stitch. The 0.5 remains, we don't change it. For pull compensation, I set 0.2 again. Down here I tick trim after again, so it cuts the thread at the end. Now it shows how it will look, and once that's done, apply and quit. And then let's see, if I select all three and go to Extensions, Inkstitch, Visualize and Export, then I can see how it will embroider. This works for me now that it starts with the apple, meaning the red, then the green, the leaf, and finally the brown. And we can see that this will be the total 4,375 stitches. We'll close this now, and with that, the conversion of our apple design is finished. What you also need to know is that it always starts the embroidery with the element that is at the very bottom, and finishes with the one that is at the top. If you want a different order, you select it, click it, and keep the button held down until you drag it to the right place. Or use the arrows to move it up and down. This works for me now. Over here, we can add a name for the design. Let's name this, for example, Apple Fill. If we click on this twice, we can then change the name. Now, let's make an embroidery file out of it. First, we save this. We go to File, then Save. Here we choose a place for it. Let's give it a name. Make it absolutely sure it remains in SVG. This is the format that is editable, so if we want to change anything on the apple later, if we open this file, we can change it here whenever. And when the saving is done, you can choose Export, but I usually choose Save As. Here we choose where to put it just the same. We give it a name. We choose our embroidery machine's format here. I have a brother machine which needs the PES format, so I select PES here and save it. Let's see why it's important to have it saved in SVG. Let's open a new template. Let's choose a hoop size. And let's open the PES file we just created. We can select it right here under Open Recent. If you look, this is the embroidery file itself. We cannot change this anymore. It contains the data that the embroidery machine needs. That is why it is always the most important thing to have it saved first to SVG and only then as an embroidery file format. So we have created the embroidery file. Let's copy it to a USB stick, not the SVG, but the format compatible with your embroidery machine. For me, the PES file. And let's embroider it. In the next video, we will be going over 2 versions of the satin stitch and the bean stitch. Thanks for watching. If you find this video useful, make sure to like and subscribe.